If Marco Polo had a LinkedIn profile, it'd probably say, "First European in China." #trailblazer. But is that headline really earned? Let's take a stroll down Silk Road memory lane, where every middle school textbook casts Polo as the Indiana Jones of Mongol China, map in one hand, travel diary in the other, bravely carving new trails as the original European explorer. Sure, his name became synonymous with papermaking, noodles, and an ocean of pool parties, but was Marco really the very first guest at Kublai Khan's palace? Sorry, Polo fans, the legends got more shine than the facts. Turns out, Marco was more Buzz Aldrin than Neil Armstrong. Not the first to take the giant leap, but definitely the best at grabbing headlines about it. A lesser-known group of European daredevils had already beaten him to the east. Picture this, early 1200s missionaries trekking through the Mongol Empire, braving yak butter tea and endless steppes, only to be upstaged by a Venetian influencer with better branding. Enter Giovanni da Pian del Carpine and William of Rubruck. Names your history teacher probably mumbled just once, if at all. These friars reached the Mongol court decades before Marco ever saddled his horse. If adventurer fame ran on first come, first served, Marco would be the guy holding the tourist map and asking directions from the real, less glamorous pioneers. So why does Polo's name still glow neon bright over history's Silk Road? Simple. He wrote a viral travelogue. The Book of the Marvels of the World turned his not-so-first journey into the blockbuster Europe didn't know it needed. Meanwhile, those early missionaries faded into footnotes, traveling thousands of miles just to lose the PR battle to Venice's finest. Next up, how Marco's legend rewrote history, turning those rough-and-tumble treks into yesterday's outtakes. Beyond just visiting China, stories suggest Marco Polo had a close relationship with the ruler Kublai Khan. Imagine Marco Polo as Kublai Khan's medieval LinkedIn reference, endorsing his skills in empire building and spaghetti slurping. Picture the profile. Under Skills, Marco casually lists yurt management and bowstring synergy, while Kublai hovers, finger poised to click Endorse. Popular myth paints them as BFFs, swapping Mongol lattes and plotting world domination. Hollywood eats this up. Marco spinning yarns at Khan's side in the ultimate buddy flick, the Emperor and the Venetian. But let's step off the Silk Road and into reality. The only glowing recommendations come straight from Marco himself, dictated under duress in a Genoese jail, probably hoping his cellmate would endorse storytelling advanced. Check the Mongol or Chinese archives, and you'll find the enthusiasm of an ignored friend request. No sign of Marco Polo as imperial confidant. Barely a blip. If they had a Facebook status, it'd still read, "It's complicated, 750 years on." Despite his grand travel claims, Marco was more guy in the waiting room with an old scroll than Khan's trusted advisor. Modern historians suspect he spiced up his resume. Imagine him at Venetian dinner parties, proudly announcing his title as VP of Silk Road Operations. In truth, their connection was polite and professional, with Marco's medieval networking skills. Let's say, less than stellar. No rave reviews from the Mongols, only faint echoes in Venetian tales. So next time you hear Marco Polo touted as the Mongol whisperer, remember, even history's legendary networkers sometimes have to wait ages for their connection requests to be accepted. Besides his reputed role as Kublai Khan's advisor, Polo is also credited with bringing cultural elements like pasta from China to Italy. Picture Marco Polo strutting into Venice, noodles in hand like history's first foodie influencer. His compatriots gape in awe. What witchcraft is this? As he unveils the secret of pasta, just imported fresh from China. If history had Instagram, this would be Marco's viral spaghetti moment, complete with boomerangs of noodle twirls and the hashtag pasta from the East. But let's pump the brakes on this tasty tall tale. The myth that Marco Polo introduced pasta to Italy is as stubborn as overcooked angel hair, sticky, tangled, and impossible to swallow. While Polo's travel tales are legendary, Italians were already twirling fettuccine long before his homecoming. Historical records show pasta-like dishes in the 12th century Sicily, courtesy of Arab traders. Unless Marco time-traveled or smuggled dried noodles in his medieval carry-on, imagine TSA confiscating a suspicious bundle of fettuccine. The timeline simply doesn't add up. And let's not forget the Italian grandmothers, the original noodle ninjas, kneading dough and shaping pasta well before Polo's gap year in Asia. Mentions of macaroni, lasagna, and other wheat wonders pop up in Italian texts that predate his journey by centuries. Plus, Chinese noodles and Italian pasta aren't cousins. They're more like distant pen pals. Different flours, different techniques, different stories. So where did this legend spring from? Likely an early 20th century marketing move, a delicious slice of spun spaghetti meant to dazzle and delight. Marco Polo's writings mention plenty of meals, but a dramatic pasta handoff? Not a noodle to be found, because it never happened. Believing Marco invented pasta is like thinking Columbus introduced America to pizza. Sorry, Polo, no pasta points for you. While these tales are popular, the accuracy of Polo's accounts, including his introduction of pasta, has been questioned. Think Marco Polo's travel stories were just dry, medieval accounting reports? Think again! Popular legend casts Marco as a pen-pushing number cruncher, whose journals read like spreadsheets, just with more camels. According to the myth, every line in his diary screams boring accuracy. Honestly, compared to Polo's accounts, an accountant's dream journal might as well be a psychedelic roller coaster. But hold your camels. Fact-checkers, ancient and modern, have raised a skeptical eyebrow at Marco's tales. He gushes about cities with gold roofs that sparkle under the sun, and merchants rolling in magical riches. Yet in hundreds of pages, not a single peep about the Great Wall of China. Yes, that Great Wall. He somehow missed a structure visible from space, but managed to describe unicorns? Somebody get this guy a medieval GPS? Here's the juicy bit. Scholars suggest our man Marco might have been sprinkling in more embellishments than a travel blogger desperate for likes. Maybe he borrowed tall tales from local storytellers. Maybe he snuck in some padding between dinner parties at Kublai Khan's palace. Or, brace yourself, maybe he used the medieval equivalent of Instagram filters. Who hasn't jazzed up a travel story after a long journey and a dodgy meal? In the end, before we brand Marco Polo a fabulist, let's admit, don't we all fudge our travel tales just a smidge? Or was Marco simply the world's first travel influencer? Light on selfies, but heavy on creative liberties. Either way, his journey still beats your cousin's yearly beach vacation slideshow. One reason for skepticism is that Chinese historical records make no mention of Polo's presence in China. If Marco Polo was the original globetrotter, why does China's sprawling paper trail act like he ghosted the place? Seriously, he boasts 17 years of courtly swagger, rubbing elbows, or at least silken sleeves, with Kublai Khan himself. The classic tale has Polo galloping across the Middle Kingdom, sampling quirky cuisine, even dabbling in imperial administration. You'd think he'd earn at least a metaphorical tourist stamp, or get name-dropped in a palace memo. But China's official Yuan dynasty records are as silent about Marco Polo as a fortune cookie about your actual future. And bear in mind, imperial scribes back then were obsessed with red tape. These bureaucrats cranking out paperwork rivaled pandas in their dedication. If you sneezed near the emperor, someone jotted it down. Foreign visitors with a whiff of importance usually left a calligraphic breadcrumb trail. Yet no sign of Marco. Nada, niente, zip. Nada, hey, here's a Venetian dude. It leaves us with two options. Either Mongol clerks hit a very targeted delete button, or our Venetian friend was an early practitioner of what today we'd call creative nonfiction. Q scholars speculating that Polo stuck to China-adjacent stops, or borrowed other travelers' tales to dazzle European ears. Others hold out hope that Marco slipped under the radar thanks to some unpronounceable spelling, or just blended into the roguish multicultural crowd at the Khan's court. Here's the kicker. Even a Venetian armed with the world's first travel blog would have left more traces than Marco did. So thanks to this imperial unfollow, Polo's legendary journey is less Google Maps and more Schrödinger's road trip. Next time someone swears Polo made it to China, remind them, history loves to keep its biggest mysteries stuck in the outbox. Despite the lack of Chinese records, some believe Polo introduced concepts like paper money to Europe after his travels. Forget Marco Polo bringing back spaghetti. What about a wallet full of wild ideas? Legend has it Polo single-handedly introduced paper money to Europe, as if he returned from China juggling a magical purse stuffed with yuan. But let's check that travel receipt. The myth goes, Polo waltzes into Kublai Khan's court, spots those black-signed notes zipping around like VIP passes, scribbles breathless descriptions in his travelogue, and rushes home to blow Europe's collective mind. If he'd actually hauled some of that paper money back, medieval Europeans might have tried eating it. After all, they were pretty adventurous with pasta. Here's the real deal. Polo was indeed dazzled by Chinese paper money and described its alchemical magic at length. But Europe, masters of red tape, already had their own proto-paper. Promissory notes and IOUs were making the rounds long before Polo packed his saddlebag. State-backed paper money wouldn't catch on in Europe for centuries. Kings and bankers preferred hoarding gold and inventing new ways to slap you with overdraft fees over embracing cellulose cash. Polo's tales did spark imaginations. Rumors of a land where silk could be bought with signatures instead of clinking coins. But the closest he got to Europe's first central banker was gifting everyone a big idea, and possibly indigestion from all those incredulous gasps. So next time someone credits Marco Polo with inventing modern money, remind them, you can't pay taxes with travel anecdotes, even if they're about Chinese banknotes. In the end, Polo brought stories, not suitcases of yuan, much to the chagrin of his relatives, who just wanted a souvenir, not an introduction to inflation. Regardless of these claims, Polo is said to have penned his memoirs while imprisoned, though the true authorship is debated. Imagine setting off on a 24-year epic across deserts, steppes, and the imperial court of China, only to hit the ultimate plot twist: writer's block. In jail. Yes, Marco Polo, history's ultimate globetrotter, found himself locked up in a Venetian cell, famously scribbling his tales while rocking the latest in prison couture. Or so the legend goes. The myth casts Marco as a travel-weary lone scribe, quill in hand, grinding out memoirs like Eat, Pray, Conquer Asia. The reality? Even behind bars, Marco outsourced his homework. Enter Rustichello de Pisa, fellow inmate, professional romance novelist, and the guy who made sure Marco's tales came complete with extra dragons. Polo simply narrated. Rustichello turned it into medieval pulp. Think Marco Polo and the Prisoner of Azkaban, but with more Mongols and fewer Dementors. Rustichello was the original ghostwriter, conjuring dragons on deadline and ensuring no dull fact went unjazzed. Apparently, Italian prisons specialized less in gruel and more in group storytelling. Call it NaNoWriMo Dungeon Edition. The result? The Travels of Marco Polo, a mashup of fact, fantasy, and a hefty dose of jailhouse boredom. The book became Europe's hottest travel blog, lighting explorers' imaginations and ambitions on fire, even if skeptics quibbled over those unicorns and questionable noodle recipes. Despite Marco's "I was totally there" vibe, historians still argue over what he actually saw, and what was just bizarre gossip. So yes, Marco told it. Rustichello wrote it, with a few creative liberties tossed in behind bars. But why did Marco's tales endure? Dragons and all. Well, that's a story still waiting to unfold. Adding to the legends, some accounts even suggest Marco Polo met Genghis Khan, further complicating his historical narrative. Hook. Picture Marco Polo rubbing elbows with Genghis Khan, silk robes skimming yakskin carpets, goblets of slightly curdled yak milk raised in awkward diplomatic toasts, and small talk bouncing between best Silk Road shortcuts? And seriously, how do you make those horses run that fast? Imagine the young Venetian adventurer dazzling the most feared man in history with tales of Venetian gondolas and, of course, his impeccable hat game. Myth. Hollywood loves a good crossover, so popular lore insists Marco Polo and Genghis Khan swapped travel tips, shared secret recipes, and maybe even battled it out over some ancient board games. If you believe half the stories, they were inseparable partners in crime, plotting epic Eurasian escapades. Spoiler alert, they definitely were not. Facts. Here's the snag. Marco Polo was born in 1254. Genghis Khan died in 1227. Unless our Venetian hero had a DeLorean parked nearby or a seriously glitchy Mongol to Venetian translator app, this meetup wasn't happening. Instead, Marco made his mark at the court of Kublai Khan, Genghis's grandson, where he became the star guest of the ultimate Mongol palace party. No grand warlord meet and greet, just some serious throne room swagger. Punch. So no, Marco didn't swap life hacks with the original con. He just showed up fashionably late to the family reunion hosted by the grandkids. If there had been a Genghis Marco reunion special, it'd be Netflix gold. But alas, history's scriptwriters dropped the ball. Bridge. Don't worry. Marco's stories bridged East and West and sparked centuries of myth-making, and maybe even inspired a few pasta recipes. Because in exploring, as in name-dropping cons, there's only so much room for historical accuracy before someone pulls out a calendar.